5. Change of plans. The start of a new week came. They found where the bus was for the apartment complex, and Grace joined one other girl there in the morning. Grace learned her name was Teresa, a thin, gaunt girl, pale-skinned with black, coarsely waved hair that went straight across the middle of her back and bangs cut bluntly across the middle of her dark brown eyes. She wore black lipstick and black clothes. Grace attempted conversation with Teresa any chance she got. Grace got that trait from her mother, Joy. She had a normal day at school, and it passed by in a flash. When she got off the bus, Teresa was there. Grace was sure to start a conversation and ask her questions. One of the first questions was if she went to church anywhere. Teresa said that she was into witchcraft. Grace usually tried not to judge based from appearances, but based off Teresa's, it wasn't a big shock to her. Grace felt compelled to tell her about Jesus and the way to salvation. There wasn't much response from Teresa except being a little uncomfortable around the subject. Grace was able to tell the message anyway, as graciously as possible. They parted ways and went into their own apartments. A witch and into witchcraft. Why are there so many witches around me? Are they trying to spy on me? Fear taunted her and beat her into a cowering little girl again. Grace locked the door, kept all the lights off, blinds shut, and pointed upward and lay under the window of the living room. This is the only place she felt comfortable, where nobody could see her if they looked through the window. People watching her, spying on her, planning wicked things against her became her greatest fear, and it controlled her. She was Fear's puppet, and Fear rejoiced at seeing her cower there under the window, motionless on the ground. Fear was successful in paralyzing his victim. Grace was careful not to breathe too loudly for anyone to hear, not even herself, even though it was ridiculous to think that anyone could actually hear her breathing from outside of the apartment. She didn't move from that place until she heard the jingling of Hannah's keys unlocking the door. Grace quickly got up on the couch and sat there, acting like she was just fine before Hannah came in. She was calmed and okay when everyone was awake and in the light with her. That was her safe place, the light and the company of people who loved her. Bedtime was different. When she was in the room alone with her imagination in the dark, Fear prodded her further into his entanglements. He entangled himself in Grace's mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Fear pushed her further and deeper into isolation as he expanded his territory. Now, she wasn't only afraid to be with her mom at home, but was also afraid of the night, of the witches around her, and even being at the apartment with Hannah and Ken. The difference was, she was deathly terrified of going back home. Fear was ever present, ever laughing, and ever taunting. He was gaining ground. He was winning. The next couple days went like this. It was Tuesday night, everyone in bed asleep except Grace. She lay there writhing in fear. It caused her to enter Hannah and Ken's bedroom. She slowly walked to Hannah's side of the bed, wanting to only wake her to tell her that she was afraid, hoping to sleep on the floor in their room instead of the living room sofa. "Hannah," Grace whispered. "Hannah!" She didn't move, so Grace nudged her a bit. Hannah still didn't wake. So she said a little bit louder voice, "Hannah, I'm scared." Ken turned around and saw Grace hovering above Hannah. In reaction, not realizing it was Grace, he yelled out. Grace ducked down quickly, scared that he might hurt her, not knowing. "It's me, it's me, it's me." Her voice trembled and she started crying. "What's going on?" Hannah woke up from a loud yell and commotion. "She scared me. I saw her standing above you and I yelled," Ken explained his actions. "I'm scared," Grace cried quietly, voice quivering as she stood back up with her blanket wrapped around her. "Okay, just get in bed. You can lie next to me." Hannah moved over closer to Ken and Grace was on the edge of the bed. There was hardly any space, but they made it work. It helped Grace sleep for the night. She felt better for the time being. Grace was able to finally get some sleep, and she was grateful that Hannah and Ken were so accommodating. Wednesday, Joy came by and picked Grace up to go to church. Afterward, when Joy dropped Grace off at Ken and Hannah's, they went inside to talk. Joy said to Grace, Grace, I want you to come back home with me. Mom, I'm still afraid. I can't come back home. Judah and Anthony left this morning with your dad to Oregon. It'll just be me. I want you to come home with me. No, Mom, I can't come back. Not now, not tonight. Just give me more time. I will come back home with you. I just can't, not right now. Joy started getting irritated with her daughter and said, You're coming with me, and that's it. Hannah and Ken were there. They were getting infuriated with Joy for not listening and trying to force Grace into coming home that night. Mom, Grace isn't going with you. She's scared. Can't you see? Joy became frantic and grabbed onto Grace's arms. She started to yank her toward the open door. No, I'm not going with you, Mom. I'm staying here. Grace fought with all she had. She pulled away, trying to get out of the strong grips of her mother. Grace's eyes burned, her face red, and tears streamed down her face as she fought for what she felt like her life. If I go with you, I'll die. That's it, Mom. Get out of my house now. Let go of Grace, Hannah yelled out. She intervened with the struggle and was able to loosen her mom's grips on Grace's arms. Grace fell away from Joy as Hannah pushed her mother out the already open door. You get out of here and don't come back. You don't do this to Grace. This is not right. You hear me? You don't do this, she hollered out the door after Joy, who was already walking away. Grace looked out the door at her mother leaving. Joy looked back at them. Tears filled her eyes and great sorrow filled her soul as she turned away and walked to her car. Grace felt so bad for her and wanted to go with her, but fear's grips were stronger than her mother's grips. Grace's hot tears streamed as she couldn't help but to sob. Grace couldn't believe what was happening. Her family was falling apart in so many ways right before her very eyes. Grace knew Joy wanted her daughter at home with her. She had nobody. Alan abandoned her with divorce. Then Judah and Anthony left with Alan, and now Grace refused to go back home. She would not ever go back knowing there was an evil plan out there to kidnap, rape, and kill her. Joy had nobody else. Grace's heart broke over the whole thing. She knew her mother was hurting, but she just couldn't go home. Hannah's adrenaline was still high, breathing heavily, eyes flaming and teeth clenched from the confrontation between her and her mother. Hannah shut and locked the door behind her and asked Grace, Grace, do you want to go to Oregon with Dad? Grace couldn't talk yet. She was still choked up with overwhelming emotion, so she just nodded yes, then squeaked out a question. Didn't Judah and Anthony already leave with him today? Aren't they already gone? Yes, but I'm calling Dad right now. Hannah made an executive decision and closed herself in her bedroom for the phone call. Grace couldn't hear the conversation. Dad, you need to come back and pick up Grace.
Why? What's happening?
She wants to live with and stay with you in Oregon. Last week, Grace came home from school. She was by herself and heard a man talk to Rocky outside, and he said, Stay there, Rocky. Rocky didn't bark, and then she heard footsteps outside her bedroom window, and it wasn't Judah. He was with Mom and Anthony, and Mom told a lady from her church, and the lady told her that someone was planning to kidnap Grace, rape her, and then kill her on the third day. This lady is an actual witch, Dad. Witches do this sort of thing. Grace has been staying with me this week, and she's really scared. Mom tried to get her to come back home and grabbed her, trying to force her to go home with her. Grace was crying and terrified, and I think you need to come and pick her up and take her with you to Oregon.
Okay, I'm in Nevada right now. I'll turn around and come get her.
Thanks, Dad. She's still with me. When will you be here to pick her up?
I don't know. Probably sometime early in the morning.
Okay, see you then.
Okay, bye.
Bye. They hung up the phone. Grace, Hannah said as she entered the living room, Dad's going to turn around and come pick you up to live with him. You should make sure all your things are put together. Grace thought that going with her dad was going to solve her problems, that she wouldn't be afraid when she left the little town of southern Arizona. Those people who want to hurt me won't be in Oregon, so I could have peace and safety, which was all she wanted. Though her eyes were puffy and red from crying, she finally pulled herself together and calmed down. She believed that she was going to beat this nasty plan and beat fear once and for all when she moved with her dad to Oregon, 1,300 miles away. Alan, Judah, and Anthony turned around in Nevada. "We're going back." "Why?" Judah asked. "Your sister Grace has been going through some stuff, and I'm going to go get her." "You mean what the witch told Mom? I heard about that. She told Mom that some man was going to kidnap Grace, hide her in a cellar with dirt floors, cedar walls, and cedar steps, that he had an old blue or gray beat-up truck. My friend and I went around the neighborhood looking for the houses with that kind of truck. We knocked on the doors. If it was a nice family or a woman with children, we left them alone and said we had the wrong house. If it was a single-looking man, we also told him we had the wrong house, but left a death note in his mailbox. We wanted to scare him off if he was the one making those plans." This next information was eerie and gave Judah goosebumps. He continued, "Dad, we found that cellar. My friends and I were going around the neighborhood and looking for old houses that looked abandoned, and we found one when we were snooping around. We saw the cellar, Dad. It was just as the witch described. It had dirt floor, cedar for walls, and cedar steps too. It was only a few blocks away from Mom's house. I think the plan is real." There was silence in the car except the engine and the wheels running their course against a flat, straight desert highway. Both of them were quietly convinced that the information given by the witch was plausible and Grace could be in real danger if left with her mom. Judah didn't sleep for the whole ride, but Anthony was asleep through the whole thing. It was about 2 in the morning by the time they turned south off Interstate 10, only 50 minutes away from Hannah's and an hour away from Joy's. The whole time, Judah had been thinking about everything. He thought about his mom, how she would be by herself when Grace left with Dad. He broke the silence. "Dad, I think I should stay with Mom, since Grace will be going with you now." With that break of silence, Anthony woke up. "What's going on? Where are we?" He recognized where he was. He just wasn't sure why they were there. It appeared they were going back toward Sierra Vista. "I'm going to go get Grace. She needs to come with me, and Judah's going to stay with your mom now." "You're going to stay with Mom?" Anthony asked Judah. "Yeah, I don't think it would be good for her to be by herself. You should stay with Mom too." "I guess so," Anthony agreed. "That's a good idea, boys. You take care of your mom and each other." Judah felt a newfound duty to try to protect his mom, even though he was still a teenage boy and wasn't aware of how that would really look like. He didn't really have a good example from his dad on how to be a man of the house. He just thought living with her and keeping aware would be enough. "Okay then, I'll call your mother and let her know we're coming to drop you off first, and that I'm picking up Grace to take with me." Alan took out his cell phone and called Joy. She answered.
"Hello?"
"Hi. I heard what was happening and what's been going on with Grace. I'm on my way to pick her up. She says she wants to go to Oregon with me now, and I'm going to drop Judah and Anthony off at your place. They'll stay with you. Then I'll go pick up Grace. I'll be there in about an hour or so."
Okay. Hannah called earlier and told me Grace was going with you, that you were turning around to come pick her up. I'm glad the boys will stay. That's good."
Joy felt defeated from the fight she had at Hannah's apartment, but was relieved to know that the boys had decided to stay. Alan hung up the phone and Joy held it off the hook as she hunched over and sobbed. "Why, Lord? Why?" she cried out. "Why is this happening to me? This hurts so bad. Please keep my children safe, Lord. Please." That's all she could say. She hung up the landline, grabbed her blanket, and curled up on the couch. She was going to sit there and wait for her sons to come home. She was glad someone was coming home to her, but still upset by all that had happened at Hannah's. She felt dreary, exhausted, and yet quieted. The Lord comforted her, and she began to feel better in her spirit. She understood that somehow everything was going to be okay. God had a plan, even though she herself couldn't understand. From her perspective, nothing made sense. But she was at peace and trusted God and His ways. Knock, knock, knock. Judah lightly tapped on the door. Joy was a little startled and shook herself awake from drifting off to sleep. She opened the door and let Judah and Anthony in, carrying all their things. Alan was standing out, away from the door. He wasn't much for words, but considering the circumstances involving both their children, he felt obligated to say something. "I'm sorry this is all happening. I think it's best if I take Grace." If somebody is planning on hurting her, she should go with me. Joy knew that she agreed, for her daughter's safety at least. I know, I think it's best too. Be safe. Alan got in his car and took off. As soon as he pulled away, Joy shut the door and locked it behind her. Meanwhile, at Hannah's, Grace was all packed up, her things by the door. They were all sound asleep except Hannah. She stayed awake waiting for her dad's knock. Grace was curled up on the couch with her blanket, exhausted by all the turmoil earlier. A soft knock on the door woke Grace up, but she was expecting it. Hannah heard it too and answered. It was only Alan, and Hannah wondered aloud, "Where's Judah and Anthony?" "They decided to stay with your mother since Grace is coming with me now. I just dropped them off." "Oh, okay, that's good." She turned to Grace, who was sleepy-eyed as she pushed herself up from laying down. "Are you ready to go?" Hannah asked. "Yeah." She stood up to get her things, but Hannah took hold of her and gave her a big hug. "I love you, Grace. Everything's gonna be okay." Grace hugged her back. It was awkward. Their family rarely hugged. She looked into Grace's eyes, trying to reassure her, and Grace looked down and smiled back as she went out the door holding her things. Hannah looked at Alan. "Thanks, Dad. Be safe." "Yeah, I'll see you later," Alan said. "Call me when you get there," Hannah made him promise. "I will." Alan said his goodbyes. He took Grace's things from her, and they walked to the car.